So our next speaker is the education coordinator from the Elkhorn Slough Reserve, Virginia Guhin.
Alrighty. Thank you, Kirsten. Thanks so much for the invitation. And I also just have to say thank you so much for letting me follow Charlie, because he really did set up. I didn't realize that when I was putting this together, but he really did set up the conversation, and I think helps to set the stage in regards to what I'll be talking about. So anyway, I'm really excited to be able to share how we on the education side at the reserve, and really across all the sector, across all the reserves, the teachers are working hard to weave this idea, these concepts of wetlands and water levels into our education programs. And so what I'd like to share with you is how we highlight the importance of marsh resilience in the face of sea level rise and other changing impacts and human impacts to our marshes. So we'll stay on the slide just for a second, Kirsten. So like every marsh, every reserve in the reserve system, we annually host a Teachers on the Reserve workshop. So you may have heard of these referred to as TOTES. So TOTES are these fabulous workshops that are designed to get teachers out in the field, doing data collection, being exposed to and allowing them to explore estuaries and estuarine science concepts. And these workshops are often a collaboration between the research sector and the education sector. So as Kirsten pointed out, she and I've worked for years on these workshops. I've also worked with John Haskins, our water quality guy. And so again, these are also workshops that are mandated by NOAA. This is one of our reporting metrics. So as I pointed out, reserves across the system are hosting these TOTES, but they're all a little bit different. And so at this particular site, what I'd like to share with you is a lesson that was developed with Kirsten Wasson taking the lead on this. And that was the question: how can we share with teachers and really demonstrate through data collection how plant communities are impacted by what water level changes within a marsh system? And so I think this does a really great job at demonstrating that. So Kirsten, if you could, let's go to the next slide. Alrighty, so if you look at the top here, and I'm not sure how this is mirroring back to you, but on the far right on the top, you'll see across there is our T boardwalk, as we refer to it. So it's a boardwalk over the marsh. On the right-hand side, we have our grassland. There's a slight slope that goes down through an ecotone before it levels out over the marsh. And then as you walk across the boardwalk, you're going to cross high marsh, low marsh, mud flat, and then we've got a little island patch of pickleweed on the other side. So this is our site where we're doing our investigation. So as part of this, let's go to the next slide. So once we've got the teachers in the field, we go out on our T boardwalk. We're laying out a transect tape. And so that transect tape is starting at 0, which is our below tide, and that is over that mud.
That looks like it hurts.
Was that a question for me? No? Okay, I'll keep going. So we've got our 0, which is out at the end, not quite the end of the T boardwalk, but over that little mud flat area. And then we run that transect tape up to the ecotone, so about 30 meters, depending on a lot of the conditions that day. And then each of the teachers is put into teams. They're using quadrats and these little bamboo sticks that you can see in the picture there. And what we're doing is taking a point intercept survey of plant species across an elevation change. And so let's go ahead to the next slide. There we go. So you can see here teachers with quadrats. We've got them on ropes because we found out the first year if we throw them over the side, they stay on the other side, and then we have to crawl into the mud. So we've got them on ropes. You can see the point intercept on the quadrat, the bamboo stick. And so again, teachers are throwing them over at designated sites across that transect tape and doing that point intercept data collection. Next slide. All right, and so here's our very simple but very effective form for data collection in the field. On the left, the quadrat, the teachers are marking their location. So maybe they're every 5 meters or whatever their designated and assigned locations are going to be. And then they're doing their point intercept counts across. And so what's been cut off here is our code. So there's a code, M for mud, P for pickleweed. Kirsten, you probably know better than I do what all our codes were. But in any case, they're going through, and at each point intercept, they're basically accounting for, I see astroplex, and I see pickleweed, and I see saltgrass or cordgrass or something. And so they're putting those down for each of the point intercepts. And at the far right side, you can see where we began to then calculate percent coverage of pickleweed, high marsh, and then our grassland plants. And let's see. Let's go ahead and go to the next. Yeah, so here's a great example of some of the materials that the teachers also have in the field. So they have a plant guide, and you can see we have low marsh, and then we have our high marsh plants. What has subsequently been added is mud, and we'll talk about why we've really had to account for mud in these surveys. So the next slide, please. Yeah, and then our grassland plants. So again, teachers are in the field, they're collecting their data, and they're using these plant guides to identify the plants. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. All right, so back in the classroom while we're having lunch, the teachers then are using this X and Y axis to log their data. And I apologize for the photograph. It really was the best I could find, which is surprising. So I'll have to do better this next year. Starting on the left-hand side with our X-axis, you can see that it goes from 0 to about 26 meters, which was what we were calculating that year. And then up the Y-axis is our percent coverage. In blue is our pickleweed or low marsh plants, including mud. And as you can imagine, we've got a spike right over there at like 5 meters, and then it kind of bounces back and forth. And then we have this precipitous drop around 22 meters where we lose all of that marsh plant. Likewise, in red, we have our grasslands, and as expected, percent coverage is very high on the far right. And then it has that same kind of drop off and a little bit of gradual out to about 14 meters. And in the center is our bell curve, and that's our high marsh plants where we have them smattered across the entire spectrum. All right, so this graph is just really where we begin to have the conversation, where we ask the teachers to think about what are they observing and starting to connect the dots and making some correlations between plant species presence and elevation. I think it does a great job also for a jumping off point, because this is where we begin to, and then reflecting back on Charlie's pictures that he showed you of those high steep slopes that we have around our marsh, as we begin to talk about sea level rise, the teachers now begin to see that unless we have the ability, unless there is the space for gradual migration during sea level rise and other impacts that may be taking place in a marsh, that this is problematic. And this is where a marsh cannot be resilient. Is that my time?
You have 1 minute.
1 more minute. Okay, next slide. Let's roll it. Okay, surveying during COVID. Let's go to the next one, because I think this is where I want to wrap up. So in 2023, big impact. We had a reconstruction of the T boardwalk, and it really damaged our site. And so we were forced into the field. Next slide. You can see in this slide where they are looking over, it is all mud. It is mud and ulva. And this is just the damage that took place after that construction period. One more slide. And so we can do a comparison back to 2016 when we had a fairly healthy marsh for us going out past, and then what we're dealing with now. And I think this is just a great example of what marshes are dealing with across the country, where there is not only construction and human impact that's taking place, right now, but they're also, these marsh communities are being faced with sea level rise. And so there's a lot of pressures, and that's, what we're dealing with and what you all are doing the great science on. And so just very appreciative from the education community to be able to have your science, to be able to engage with teachers. One last slide. And ultimately it's the transferring of science. And so what we're hoping to do is inspire questions, concern, and problem solving for the protection of estuaries like the Elkhorn Slough. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we do have time for a question if somebody has a question. Well, if something occurs to you, you can put it in